You're now rocking with Back to School, the podcast, Decoding Youth Culture, hosted by Luke Hodson, powered by NERDS Collective. Make sure you stay tuned.
Welcome to Back to School, the podcast decoding youth and culture, hosted by your boy Luke Hodson, founder of NERDS Collective, the leading youth and culture marketing agency. On this week's episode, we have a very special guest, Oyin Akiniyi, head of cultural conversations at Chivas Regal. Welcome to the show, mate.
Thanks, honey. How are you?
Good. Excited to have you on board. Before we jump into the questions around kind of industry, marketing, etc., I wanted to just get our viewers to understand a bit about you, where you come from, how you got into the game. Would you mind starting at the beginning?
Well, yes, straight off the bat.
Come on.
So obviously my name is Oyin Akiniyi. I've been in a kind of creative content, culture, marketing space for about a long time, put it that way. Started off, I think after uni.
Yeah.
I'll be really honest. I was like, my friend was passionate about music. So I was like, okay, cool. I'm going to jump on what you're jumping on. And she wanted to get into like A&R. So I was like, okay, cool. I don't know anything about A&R, but I'll try this marketing thing. Yeah. And so one of my first ever foot in the door was working at Island Records.
Sick. So what university did you go to?
I went to terrible university. I hope it's probably not terrible anymore, but it was terrible then. I went to Luton.
Yeah, you went to Luton.
And now it's called Bedfordshire. So I went there. And then post-uni, because the thing is, I think when I left uni, during uni, I never thought about careers. Yeah. So then when I come out of uni, I was like, oh, wow. Like,
shit, I've got to get on it.
Yeah, I got to get on it. I had no work experience, none of that thing. Luckily, there was this really random scheme where you could do it for 6 months and then they'll give you like an internship. It was that chocolate factory in Wood Green. I don't know if it's still there. Where you could do 6 months of kind of music business training. Yeah. And then post the 6 months, you would then be giving an internship at a label. So I started at Island Records. I was there for about, I don't even know now, maybe a year.
Were you always into music? As you growing up, were you raving?
No.
The club sounds?
I think I've always been into kind of like culture and like at uni, even college, we did like talent shows, we set up talent shows. Yeah. At uni, we set up talent shows. At uni, I was into the radio. Yeah. I was like a producer on the uni radio or whatever. Yeah. So like I kind of was always into like creativity. Curation. Yeah, exactly. And at uni, I did like media production. Mm-hmm. So I think my headspace is always in like creative and content and just like making stuff happen. Yeah. I was never really like, I'm passionate about the music industry. Yeah. I was just more passionate about the entertainment space. Yeah. Best thing about working in the music industry for me at that time was the networking. So the music industry is quite like, for me anyway, my experiences, it's all about building a network, knowing people. And from that network, I met Chantel Fiddy. Yeah. And she used to be a mentor at a magazine called Live Magazine. Yeah. And Chantel's just dope. And so she just said, oh, look, I said I was looking for opportunity. And she said, I know this organization called Liberty. Yeah. At this time, I didn't know anything. Even though I studied advertising at uni, I don't know what I was studying because I didn't know nothing about advertising.
What did you get in your degree?
Oh, I got terrible. I got 2-2.
I failed every year. Come on, it means nothing.
Look, don't fail, kids. But I think, honestly, education for me at that point wasn't the right thing.
Yeah, same.
If I do it now, I'll probably still fail.
Why wasn't the right thing? I was dyslexic. I have ADD, so I can't concentrate. I can't sit in.
To this day, I can't even do a training course. Yeah. Because I don't have the attention span. Same. So if someone's sitting in front of me, talking at me for an hour, it's too much. I can't. Yeah. I fall asleep. I get really bored. I legit fall asleep. So I don't think that formal type of education would ever be for me anyway. Yeah. So I scraped my 2-2. Yeah. But I did it, so I'm proud of myself.
Yeah, and you're here, and this is it. You smashed it. So
exactly.
So she introduced you to Liberty.
Yeah, so she introduced me to Liberty. So, and Liberty was, at the time, was really, I suppose, quite unique in terms of being a creative agency. So it was kind of agnostic of platforms. Yeah. So not back in the day, creative agencies were like, you had a above the line agency, then you had your social agency, blah, blah, blah. So now that's quite normal to have like integrated or just a creative agency that just specializes in youth. Yeah. Whereas back in the day, it wasn't. And so Liberty is quite unique in that respect. And
Yeah,
also,
they were innovative. Like they were the kind of founding organization that specialized in understanding youth through a social lens, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
And
I
then
respect
even
that.
at that point, they had they believed in purpose marketing.
Yeah, I remember.
So right at the beginning, everything they did was for the lens that you could work with brands, but you can also say something meaningful.
Yeah.
But then also the type of work we did. So I worked on like launching the first ever Top Boy. So the first series of Top Boy, we did the campaign for that.
Amazing.
We did Dub Plate Drama.
Dub Plate Drama, that came out way before Top Boy, right?
Yeah, way
Old
before.
school.
Dub Plate Drama was probably like, shout out Luke Hyams, shout out so many people.
Dub Plate Drama, because that was around, what was that, early 2000s, mid 2000s?
Dub Plate Drama, because it was mid 2000s, maybe like 2000. I can't remember when I started.
Just when grime started to go mainstream, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And that was like the first kind of content series that represented
the culture.
Yeah, it looked like.
And also what's interesting, the brief for that, the creative brief for that, which is why it's all kind of gone full circle, because the creative brief was from Childline and SPCC, was like, they understand and they're not reaching the young male demographic from inner city communities. And so they wanted us to help them figure out how they can start to connect in a meaningful way with this audience. And then also you help that audience understand that they can utilize this tool, Childline, to help them navigate issues that they're having.
Yeah, nice.
So it's quite, in some respects, that brief could have gone to a traditional agency, and they could have done like a big above the line campaign, or social campaign or whatever. But the idea that they actually took risk actually in developing a TV show.
That is super like future facing.
Exactly.
Even today, that's dope. That's cool.
Yeah, exactly. And it was phenomenal for them in terms of it helped that audience recognize that Childline could be a platform for me.
Feel safe.
Exactly.
Nice.
Because remember, Dub Plate Drama was all about you choose the ending. So the idea was that each episode, the audience was able to kind of think about what happened and then decide the next steps for that protagonist. So it's really all about kind of getting them to, it's a behavior change in some respect, but at the core of it, it's about recognizing that this tool, Childline and SPCC, is a brand for me and a tool that I can use, basically. So Liberty was always, at the time, always about purpose-led and doing it through a youth-centric lens. And it's really, like, it sounds really bait, but starts with insights first. Do you know what I mean? Starting with understanding this demographic, this audience, this consumer. What are their motivators? What drives them? And then how can we create something compelling for them? Basically.
But do you think that installed the importance of purpose at a kind of
100%
early stage of your career?
100%. I think because I was at Liberty for about 3 years. Again, doing similar kind of things, really random stuff, you know. Like I launched like a youth entrepreneurship apprenticeship for young offenders with Google. So it was like a 6-week.
Wait, that's pretty like for Google.
Again, the brief was there was no brief. It came from the founder, Sam Conniff, who pitched to Google that you've got all these tools that are supposed to help small businesses. Well, young people from who come out, young offenders who come out of prison often have quite high reoffending rates.
PYO is the highest reoffending rate.
Exactly. So the kind of the hypothesis was they actually are entrepreneurs, but the difference is they're in the informal economy. So
just like what they don't hustle, it's like by the means you have.
Exactly.
I know.
So could you utilize your tools that you use for businesses for good, basically? And so it was it was wicked. Shout out to all the young people I worked with on that program.
Was it in London? Was that just London first?
It was just London. So it evolved. The program evolved, but the program started with taking 8 young people who've just recently come out of at prison, and then giving them kind of like a 8-week mentorship program where they each had a mentor from Google, alongside a kind of structured entrepreneurship process.
How did they receive it? Like the kids, so they just come out of Feltham, just been released, they go straight into the program.
Mm-hmm.
They're paired up with these kind of relatively senior people within Google. How did they cope with that? Like, how were they reacting to that transformation?
it's really difficult.
Yeah, of
really
course.
difficult
Mad
because
hard.
you've got real economic factors around them. Like, well, of course, we pay them for their time there, but there's real factors where it's like they have children, they have families, or just the fact that of getting up every morning and going into Liberty. You know, that's new for them to kind of having to have a structure. So there was lots of big macro sociological issues that we had to kind of deal with in micro ways. So luckily at Liberty, we had like pastoral care. So there was a pastoral worker in the space.
So what for people who don't know what a pastoral worker is, like how would you define that role?
Oh God. So well, shout out to Naomi. She was like essentially like a youth worker in the office whose sole purpose was to support all the young people who came into this space and ensure that they had some support around them. So whether it was for our program, so we had like the Google Digital Apprenticeships, or whether it's for young people who worked at Live Magazine, the idea was that they had somebody in Naomi who they could come to for support. And Naomi is a trained youth worker who was able to like deal with some of the bigger challenges that we as marketeers would.
That's an important role for any youth campaign, right? Anyone that's working with young people, it's like the idea that just because you're a marketeer or whatever you understand culture, that you're going to be able to understand the nuances and sensitivities and some of the challenges that young people have whilst trying to work within an environment that's completely foreign to them.
Exactly.
You can imagine coming out of prison, suddenly having to get on the train. It's like you become so hard and so disconnected as a way to survive that even then being placed into an environment that's really expressive and creative is hard.
It's scary. I remember one of my first ever work experiences was for a music company called Anglo Management. They like manage Fatboy Slim and stuff.
Yeah.
I'm this little girl from Stoke Newington, and the place was somewhere in Putney, I think it was. Everybody's white. It's proper like old school music industry. So they're super safe people. But when I first walked in, I was shook. I was like shaking with nerves. And I'm educated, right? I went to university. I've always worked my whole life.
Yeah.
But that environment was super
still intimidating.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Let alone somebody who hasn't kind of worked in more of like a formal environment, navigating that world.
Yeah. I remember like when I first got a job, like I just got sober at the time and clean, and I was just like the anxiety, like the terror, like not knowing, like I dressed mad smart. It was like way too smart. It was shirts and stuff in an agency. I used to like
for even at Liberty actually, we used to have to pitch the journalists. I don't know why actually at this point. Anyway, for some of our campaigns we pitched the journalists to kind of get them sold in or whatever. I used to write a script for myself to talk to the journalists. And I remember because I used to be so nervous.
Yeah.
One time I talked to this journalist and I was reading my script, and the journalist was so rude. He was like, "Are you reading a script?" I'm like, "No."
How old were you?
I was like 22, 23. You know what I love to see now, there's a lot of the younger people who coming in, there's a lot more confidence.
Way more confidence.
And I think at the time, there weren't many young Black people. Our culture was something that was kind of like this, was like so niche.
So micro.
That you kind of felt like, you felt confident in it, but to pitch it as ideas or whatever, everyone was telling you, nah, this ain't it yet. This ain't it. So there's a lack of confidence.
Yeah.
So now I see these amazing young people across fashion, music, art, and I just feel so excited that I feel that there's a confidence.
For sure.
Yeah.
Aware that cool comes from the Black diaspora, right? It's like they know that, and you see it, and any company that they walk into, brands are aware of it now, right?
Exactly.
It's like, it's time. It's
and
a
also,
revolution.
They've got the language. I remember back in the day, I didn't have the language to communicate some of the stuff I felt and saw. So I remember one time I was working at Liberty. One of my clients, I won't say what brand it was, went to the office, whatever. Everyone's doing introductions. And the client was like, "Oh, Oyin, what an interesting name." And I remember feeling really uncomfortable, thinking like, no, my name's not that interesting. It's just my name. But I didn't have the words to say that's offensive and that's like a microaggression. Do you know what I mean?
Because you probably took it on as like you know, something that you don't even have the right to answer back to.
Exactly.
It's like today, the culture is it's still difficult. Like there's still a lot of challenges within corporate environments, right, for young people, especially people of color. But it's a lot more support, and the culture's starting to shift.
And you can have that. And maybe I'm a bit more senior, but you can have the conversation. Whereas I can't even tell you it's mad. Some of the situations I've been across my career, I didn't feel like I didn't have the confidence or the support or the allies. You could kind of like say, oh,
that's a bit peak.
Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So now I look at the young people and I just feel like really inspired that they have the vocabulary, and the support and the allies who can all like support them,
safeguard, create like an environment where people feel confident and being boundaried in terms of what's fair and what's not.
Exactly.
So you went from Liberty
to Nike.
Okay, sick.
So again,
what was your role at Nike?
I was brand manager, so I was at Nike Foundation. So remember, if Liberty was like purpose-led, and then Nike Foundation, similar kind of purpose-led part of it. So Nike Foundation was and is part of Nike Inc.
Yeah.
It's a private foundation, which focus at the time was a thing called the Girl Effect.
So more purpose-driven work, like Nike, one of the hardest companies to get into in the world.
Well, people say that.
Yeah, and that's amazing, right? You know, you've gone from you left uni, 2-2, you did your work experience within the music industry, got a role, then you went to Liberty 3 years, and now you're at Nike. Like that's a mad progression, right? You're pushing, you know, that's I wouldn't say that's was handed to you on the plate for sure.
No.
Especially being a woman of color, right? That's, you know, you're going against the odds.
You know what? It's funny because again, it's kind of through a network. So what I mean by that is, I think in this space, this career space, it's really important to just like build a network, build relationships. Even the Nike opportunity, the role, I didn't know about the role. I don't think the role even really existed at the time. But one of my clients, a lady called Mandy Ayres, who was like, when I was at Liberty, we ran a project for Nike, like a kind of purpose-led project. And Nike was my client. We had dinner together. And she just mentioned that Nike Foundation. And she said, I think you should get in touch with them. So I said, okay, cool. Why not? Kind of thing.
Shout out her.
Exactly. So, and honestly, my whole career, I don't think I've ever, my most current role, I definitely applied for. But most of my roles I've never really applied for. It's always been, and when I say applied, of course I've applied. But in terms of...
You've been headhunted, scouted, brought in.
Exactly. It's always been through a network. So...
but that's the skill in itself, because like you said at the start, right, you were networking from early, going to the right events, put you in a place to get the visibility for you to be able to do what you need to do.
Exactly. But... I want to be very clear because when people think networking, I'm doing a talk about this in a couple of weeks. People think networking, people think, oh, hey, my name's so-and-so. Here's my business card. And then like...
Have you got a business card?
Hell no.
Have you ever had a business card?
No. I think I probably did once, but I think I left it on the desk.
No, it's dead.
I'm actually like quite introverted by
nature.
By nature. Okay. So I get quite uncomfortable. Even when I'm like in events or networking, my natural disposition is to sit in the back,
watch,
with my drink, and then just watch. And if I see one person, I might just chat. Do you know what I mean? But I'm not naturally like going out, blah, blah, blah. So when I say networking, I just mean having conversations and genuinely liking people, and building relationships in a very organic way. So all my roles have been through very organic relationships with individuals who I respect. And it's not a case of any transaction. It's just a case of they're just cool.
You must have made an impression on them to even, you know, like the Nike lady who then put you forward for the role, you know, which is testament to your character. So you went to Nike. How long were you at Nike? And then...
So I was at Nike, I think about 3 years. So Nike Foundation, like I said, the Girl Effect, which
I remember that campaign,
is all about supporting girls in developing countries. So the idea of the Girl Effect was taking the premise of Nike, the idea of building brands to create change, and taking that premise and doing it in developing countries. So we were based at the time in Rwanda, Ethiopia, and Nigeria. So the idea was that we'll build these kind of youth-centered brands. So think like a dub plate drama. as the overarching brand, and starting to kind of starting to kind of change behavior through brand-led development, essentially. So in Rwanda, we had a youth magazine, so like, I think like Just 17, but for girls. But the idea was to kind of start to role model behavior, give girls knowledge, and give them a platform, a space where they could see themselves in an aspirational light.
Nice. It's like, I guess, like showcasing and spotlighting girls that are doing interesting things to build confidence at a local level.
But making it cool. So it's not just like a
lifestyle orientated.
Exactly.
Aspirational.
Exactly. So similar with in Ethiopia, we built a brand called Yenya. Similar kind of thing. Yenya was a radio platform. So it was like, we liken it to, what's that show? It's Glee. Yeah. So like a kind of musical TV show, but radio show, where you had 5 girls who were building a brand, a band actually, and each girl represented a different type of archetype within Ethiopian culture, and they each had different issues, challenges, similar kind of thing, role modeling, aspiration, inspiration, but culture lens kind of thing.
And how long ago was that? Again, it's all of these, everything you reference is progressive, right? Really progressive.
Yes.
It's
and the wickedest thing is, it worked, and it is working.
Nice.
That was 2013, 2012.
Over a decade ago.
Yeah.
Under. And then after that was Boiler Room.
So when I came back, I went to I moved to Nigeria to build a Nigeria brand. Then I came back to London, and then I was just like, I've been doing this purpose thing for a little while. Let me step out of this kind of social good space, and go into more commercial space. Yeah. So yes, Boiler Room was one of the first brands I worked for post Nike. I did a few other stints, but of notable.
What was your role when you left there? Where did you get?
So I went as a client services. So I went as a brand partnerships director over at Boiler Room. So again, obviously the platform is a music first platform. But as a kind of revenue model, they worked with brands like Levi's, Budweiser, Ray-Ban, where their proposition was for brands who want to tap into their audience. Yeah. And we kind of like white label services for them. Okay. And so at Boiler Room, I worked on a Levi's music project. Nice. So again, similar kind of thing but Levi's music project, Levi's had already built that proposition and that platform. Yeah. We were just executing it for them, utilizing our expertise as kind of music experts.
Yeah. What artists did you work with?
Mist.
Okay, nice.
And another band called Everything. But at the time, Mist was kind of coming up.
Yeah. And he was like, I think one of the first non-London centric,
that's why we wanted him as well,
artist, right? And he very much like rapped with his like local,
and also he rapped with what language was it? I don't want to get the language wrong. He didn't always rap in English. I think it was Gujarati or Hindu.
Is he mixed? Is he?
No, but you know what? Because I think he obviously still Bangles influence, and then also he's kind of cultural influence across Brum.
Yeah, of course.
He rapped in different languages as well. So I think that was quite interesting and special about Mist at the time.
Did was it, so like, I remember Birmingham was like JK, Socks, and then Mist will come through, wasn't it? And he was like, out of all of them, he blew first, was it? And then JK come up? Yeah.
So I think Mist, well, I don't want to get this wrong, but Mist kind of, JK was there, but Mist kind of
got up quicker first, right? Yeah. And then JK. Yeah. Miss, I think you're sick. All right, so you started working at Boiler Room, looking at helping brands engage with your community. Yeah. Yeah, and you would do the kind of white labeled services as a kind of internal agency to help position them through content, right? And do you think, because you're great at content, right? Do you think that you learned your trade within content creation at Boiler Room, or have you always been creating content?
I think I've always been creating content because if I go back to Liberty was at the time very crazy. Yeah. So we didn't really have producers or anything like that. Everybody was kind of just like make it happen. Yeah. So like it was quite scrappy. Yeah. then I say where I really built strong understanding of content was when I was at Warner Music.
Okay.
So Warner has a content studio called Fire Pit.
Yeah. Okay.
So when I went to Fire Pit, I was freelancing there. The idea was to help them build a content studio that did the kind of in-house label stuff, but also was looking at building original formats for their artists.
Yeah.
And in some respects, that was a production company at the core of it.
Yeah.
But my role was to help them, I suppose, sell into the likes of Apple Music, YouTube Originals, blah, 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 blah. But that's where I really understood
The power.
content. Do you know what I mean? Like from a production perspective, not just from a creative concepting execution, but the ins and outs of the types of people, even like, because you're getting into, I'm literally getting into budgeting. So at this point, I'm like, what does a gaffer do? What do you know what I mean? I'm asking all the questions that when I was a client side, account side, you just got your producer, you don't really question
You're
it.
not as involved.
But this time I'm really getting involved. So I've got a good understanding now of the ins and outs of production.
Yeah.
So I think that's been, for me, very important.
Yeah, and having a producer mindset, working as a brand marketeer, really, I assume allows you to have a cultural first strategy in everything that you do, right? And it comes through in terms of the campaign.
And I think
you work on.
What's useful is it helps me understand what's possible as well.
Yeah.
Like I can look at budget and know, okay, I know what's possible with that budget, or I know what's not possible with that budget.
You've cut it so many times.
Yeah. And also, to be honest with you, and working at Boiler Room because Boiler Room on one end is more editorial lens, all the way through to, say, at Warner's, which working on like, I don't know, a TV show for Apple Music or whatever. I understand how you can cut budgets to work differently, but also understand anything can work with anything. You just got to have the right team around you. Because Boiler Room, everything was, for the most part, quite in-house. I wouldn't say scrappy. I would just say it was definitely
short lead times,
culture first. I would say the whole approach was, because everybody in the business was from the culture, a culture, not necessarily the Black British culture, but different cultures.
Yeah. Music culture.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was a bit like, not how in an ad world, you got your I don't know, your creative, your producer, your whatever. You got very clear roles.
Yeah.
At Boiler Room, it's kind of like you're kind of got these multi-hyphenates, these hybrids.
Yeah.
So you kind of can make anything happen as long as you've got the right individuals in this space.
Which is kind of like the startup mentality, and often the process and the growth as a company goes from zero.
Exactly.
Fast,
the thing is, you just got there's a confidence you've got to kind of try to imbue, because turning that into a client is quite difficult.
Yeah.
When clients just want like what they're used to, which is a creative, a strategist, a production company, and you're trying to sell in something different.
Yeah.
You still got to have a bit of the grown up thinking around it to help it get over the line. Do you know what I mean?
So then you go, you come in at Chivas as head of cultural conversations globally.
Mm-hmm.
What does what's the role of someone that's head of cultural conversations?
I think for Chivas, the cultural conversations role is really about utilizing, or what should I say? It's really about the brand purpose.
Yeah.
And translating that brand purpose into something meaningful for audiences globally.
And what is Chivas Regal's brand purpose?
So at the core, our brand purpose is this idea that it's about new paths to success and elevating, supporting and celebrating that there's this, through time, there have always been people who've done things differently.
Yeah.
And that's where Chivas has kind of always placed itself.
Yeah.
The founders of Chivas Regal did it differently. They were from a small town. They weren't from a big city. It's really got boring and going to the history like scotch. But the point is, at its core, it's always about championing those who go on the path less traveled. Essentially.
Yeah.
And in this new space now, those who are going on and succeeding as well. So going on a path less traveled, succeeding and creating a new way for the next generation.
Yeah. Okay.
And so at the core of our purpose is about kind of elevating that and inspiring others that they can also do that.
So just continuously demonstrating that there is no one route to success, that there is no one formula. You don't need to have a certain background. It's open to everyone.
Exactly.
And you can be the master of your own destiny, you know.
Exactly.
If you push yourself, and it's inspiring in a generation that is needs those kind of positive role models, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think
important.
what's inspiring is because in this generation now, the tools, I suppose in some respects, have created like a democracy.
Yeah.
In regards to how you can get to the top. Obviously that, like we talked about just before, democracy is a funny word because the truth of it is there are social structures that limit people's ability to navigate the world in the way that they want to.
For sure.
But for the most part, because we're living in a space where you can do a song on TikTok and tomorrow you're like the new person, whatever, that can be the beginnings of your new journey to success.
So the algorithms basically allow anyone to kind of to suddenly kind of come out from the grassroots, right, and succeed.
Exactly.
But there is still you know, young people will state that they feel it's harder than ever to move up, right?
Yeah.
And if you think the disparity between you know, people that have money and people that don't is growing and continues to grow, right? And I think it's a really nice role where Chivas Regal was kind of continuing that focus on entrepreneurial spirit, but within a society that desperately needs people to demonstrate that, you know what, don't be held back. Right? You know, you can come from any background and still succeed. And I've talked to you guys before is this idea of like underdog psychosis, right? You know, where there's a huge contingent of young people that feel like I can never make it. It's not set up for me. It's just not for me. It's like, you know what I mean? And that can be from a really young age, where they suddenly become demotivated. They feel like there aren't people that look like me, speak like me, come from my environment that are actually ever going to be successful. And I think that where you guys are really strong is spotlighting those individuals by kind of like re-energizing a whole generation that actually this is your time.
Yeah.
No matter whatever you think about yourself, it's like you can break that away and go on to amazing things.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
And I think what we're trying to do is the idea of my team in particular, because we're global, is understanding what that means at a global level across our. So in the UK, how it shows itself up is in a specific way, versus say maybe in China, where the challenges, or even Japan or India, where the challenges will look quite different.
Yeah, of course.
So that part of what we do is looking at not just kind of the idea of culture from a kind of passion point perspective, but also from like a storytelling perspective. So the approach is storytelling first. But then through storytelling, we can then authentically play a role in the aspirational parts of society. Yeah.
And can you talk a bit about the cultural strategy that you've implemented, say, over the last 12 months? Like, what are the kind of some of the key pillars of that strategy?
Well, I think the key pillars have been around, like I said, storytelling. And really, when you think about this world that we're living in, we're kind of, what's it called? They call that the attention economy, where everyone has less attention than ever before. They have more choice than ever before. They can choose to avoid you. They can choose to ignore you. And so it's not just enough anymore to just create your traditional above the line campaign where you talk at somebody. You have to create content that is inspiring, aspirational, and entertaining first. So strategically, our perspective is on being entertaining first. And not that, and the two things can work hand in hand. You can still be entertaining first and still brand led. I think often people think when you're entertaining first, then the brand is somewhere in the back. I think you can do both. And so strategically, our perspective is on building propositions across markets that bring to life our brand message, but through entertainment vehicles. So for example, in the UK, we have the Rise content series, which was helped by NERDS. In fact, the first series was developed by NERDS, and the idea was obviously to create like a visual podcast where we told the stories of those who kind of gone on a new wave path. And that's really strategically what we're trying to do across our markets is tap into what's kind of culturally relevant and create content series and platforms that feel relevant and entertaining for that audience.
For the local market. And how hard has it been transforming a whiskey brand which can feel quite outmoded in today's society, you know, in terms of a category? How hard has it been transforming a business like Chivas Regal and placing it at the forefront of culture globally?
I think it's funny. I think the hardest part potentially is more internal than it is external, because for the most part, if you think about the consumer kind of lens, I don't know how many people know that Hennessy is a cognac. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Not your average person.
No,
right?
unless you like are real interested in that alcohol, people just either like the taste, recognize the brand, and so therefore there's something they will consume.
Yeah.
So from a kind of external perspective, depending on the market, either they have zero relevance and zero knowledge of the brand. So like the UK, for example, outside of say specific communities, the UK market is like low understanding of the product or the brand. And then you have other markets where the brand recognition is higher.
Where would that be like?
So like
Asia?
Mexico, Asia, China. But maybe the association of the brand is like, it's from my dad or from my uncle or whatever it is. So with that in mind, either way, the product itself, the idea of it's a whiskey brand isn't the limitation. It's more just the relevance of it. And then that's where the storytelling aspect and being visible in culture. I think transforming a brand requires like, it's not done by one person. It's done by a general consensus within internally. And it requires a lot of confidence. Requires a lot of belief. Tenacity. And also just testing and learning. Like I am a firm believer in, it doesn't need to be perfect. Let's try something. And then we can learn by doing.
Test and learn. And that's a tech mentality, which I think like allows for mad acceleration.
Exactly.
And so some of the obstacles then you're saying were internal. Obviously Nick is, you know, the big boss, and he I think he's done really well to empower you to kind of build your department and help give you the freedom, right, to transform your team internally, because I think your team is really strong. Are there any other obstacles that you face internally that have prevented or slowed your success?
I just think when people think about culture, they think, well, when I look at culture, if I look at the music industry, fashion to a certain extent, it's agile, it's fast, it takes risks, it's impatient, that's like a direct contrast to a corporate business, a global huge corporate business, and they're not successful by accident, right? At this business, they're
well-tuned,
a fine, well-tuned machine. So you're trying to get this machine to be like, to do something that it goes against everything it knows. So the hardest bit is trying to work within the processes of this machine to make it come a little bit your way, you know? That's what is probably the most difficult bit.
It's kind of like it's like a tanker. It's very hard to suddenly turn. And
exactly. So you kind of have to kind of, rather than trying to move the tanker, just like maybe get the little bicycle from the tanker and like go your own way a little bit. And tanker's like behind you, following you, kind of thing.
So just having that freedom for innovation internally, so that you're not held down by the tanker, you can move, you know, with a bit of autonomy.
Yeah, exactly.
And push, and then test, learn, and share with the business. Do you? How important is it for the team? You talk a lot about obviously the culture and culture to reflect and represent the culture that you guys are trying to align with.
Well, for me, as a personal, aside from business, it's like hugely important. I think ever since I've been in a position of like more seniority or whatever, I've always tried my hardest to ensure that I reflect the like the audience, the consumer, not just in terms of like my team, whether it's my production. I remember when I did a freelance stint at a fast fashion brand that's based in Europe. And the first campaign, the big campaign I did with them, every single person on the shoot was a woman. Like
Sick.
every single person, from the gaffer to the spark, everybody was a woman on that shoot. And I don't, well, whether it was intentional or not, I don't really know. All I know is everybody in that shoot was just a woman, basically. And then similarly, whenever I'm on productions, as much as possible, I want that production to reflect the, like, a diverse team as much as possible. So for me, as a personal, it's hugely important because you can find it. It's not impossible.
Yeah.
It just means you might have to just work a little bit harder to get it, but it's not impossible. Then I think from a kind of business perspective, I think it's an imperative that we work harder to find the right people who can really understand the spaces that we want to communicate in.
And I think, you know, what you do is phenomenal, right? It's like, I've been on your shoots. There is such an advantage to having people behind the camera that reflect what you're trying to shoot on camera.
Exactly.
So the talent feel comfortable, right? It's like every touch point, right, felt like it was aligned with the culture that we were trying to like encapsulate in the content.
Yeah. Which
is I've never seen on a shoot, right? As well executed as the shoots that you were leading. And also then your internal team, right? You're talking about a global alcohol brand, right? Which is a very corporate environment. You've managed to handpick and draw people in that sit well outside of the industry. And as a result, I've created this amazing cultural team. Like, your team not only reflects the culture in terms of, you know, their interests, like in terms of race, social positioning, like everything is included to create this super diverse team, which I think a lot of brands should think about and consider is like, how are you pushing yourself, right? You know, going, you know, having to go beyond what's comfortable to try and have representation at every level.
Yeah. And I think, you know what's really mad, because even when I hire, I literally sit down with HR and I'll be like, here's a list of job boards you need to kind of make sure that you advertise in. I spend quite a lot of time with them going through CVs, all the stuff that I don't have to do, but I just choose to do because I want to make sure that even at the interview stage or selection stage, shortlisting stage, we're doing as much due diligence as possible. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? If it means I have to talk to more people than I should do, I don't mind. Do you know what I mean? If it just means that somebody, because I know what, I remember me, my CV probably doesn't look like everybody else's back in the day. Do you know what I mean? Like this young person who got a 2-2, who doesn't have the right credentials yet. Yeah. Just having somebody open the door for me and say, like, let me have that conversation with you was important to me. Yeah. So like, with that in mind, I'm always open to having the conversation. Yeah. And if it's not right for now, that's fine. It might be right later. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And yeah, because there's no way you come out of a 2-2 from university in Luton that you're going to be working at Nike in 3 years, 4 years. That's that. Right. That was never the vibe. It's like, I think that's amazing. And I think, you know, people that just understand culture, I think if you've been part of a culture, and it doesn't, you know, not just talking about British Black culture, any culture, you know, if you understand the mechanics, how certain groups have practices, traditions, beliefs, customs, passions, interests, that once you understand the code of that, then it's easier to then decode other cultures and then work out how your brand can be placed within that culture. Exactly. And I think that's what all your, you know, your team, and I think your understanding of culture, and that, you know, you spent a long time in the industry, allows you to see that importance and then be able to find the right candidates, even if they don't look like they're your kind of traditional archetype. Yeah. How hard is it to recruit people that come from or understand culture?
Well, I haven't found that difficult. Yes. But I think it comes down to just like, I spend a lot of time in the process.
Yeah, okay.
Working.
So you're hands-on.
Yeah.
You don't just leave it to the recruiter. HR or recruitment agency.
Exactly, because we have like, internally, we have like a recruitment person. Yeah. So I spent a lot of time in the process. Yep. I know a lot of the different job boards, etc., that we should potentially tap into. Okay. I wrote the job spec in a specific way. Okay. So. And
you're hands-on.
Yeah.
The whole process. Okay. And which is probably not what every brand marketing manager does, right?
No, exactly. And people might not have the time, and I get that, but for me, it's important.
You make the time.
So I made the time.
All right. And in terms of, so you have great staff that are aware around culture. Like, how do you guys stay on top of the latest cultural trends and movements?
I talk to people like you. TikTok, no, I'm not on TikTok. I don't know. I think I think for me, there's very little time in any working week or like in life in general.
Yeah.
And then if you've got a family or the rest of it, it's
hard.
And as you get older as well,
hard.
I'm not going to every single event or the rest of it. So part of it is I rely on an amazing team.
Yeah, specialists.
Exactly, specialists. Yeah. And then I focus on the areas where I have the most like need or gap. So for example, my knowledge of what's going on in China is super low.
Yeah.
So that's where I will spend time. So there's a few blogs that I'll read.
Yeah, what's that? Jing Daily.
Jing Daily.
Yeah.
And then I'm interested anyway. So for example, I love Trapital, which is my fave.
Sick. Bro, if I could, bro, shout out Dan. It's like, he's a legend.
Yeah.
Bro,
you know what I love about Dan is his observations are so astute
and so academic, like considered, well written.
He did an observation of a day a little while ago about
Trapital.
Oh yeah.
Trapital is a platform that basically decodes hip hop culture.
Yeah.
And it's
from a business perspective.
Yes, so it's all around the kind of economics of it, the commercial side of it. Mm-hmm. He's from the US, right?
Yeah.
So obviously the US hip hop economy is more mature than the British economy.
Yeah.
So anyway, so he does amazing thought pieces, reports, essays, studies, opinion pieces on the kind of the crossover between the commercial world and hip hop culture.
Mm-hmm. And I think that I often look at some people like Dan just to get inspiration in regards to just how to think about things.
Yeah.
So like, for example, he did an observation recently about the difference between Jay-Z and Dame Dash and Kanye in regards to they are all about ownership, 100%.
Yes.
And the kind of the challenges and limitations of 100% ownership. Also the opportunities. And then say Jay-Z, who's not all about sole ownership. And actually what that enables him or affords him the ability to kind of, there's more rope basically when you're not. So what's Jay-Z's, is it Jay-Z that had a saying about what's like, either what's the point of being 100% of zero?
Yeah. Or you could have 20% of something that's massive. Yeah. And that's a good philosophy.
And that mentality basically.
And having the confidence to do that. A lot of people hold on too tight. And if you hold on too tight, it's like you are limited in terms of like potential growth.
Like you have to learn at some point.
100% of
the. So anyway, people like Dan, Jing Daily, I read quite a lot. What's interesting, and maybe because I'm reading Jing Daily at the moment, but there seems to be this obsession or interest in collaboration more so than ever.
Yeah.
And even in recent like Gucci Palace thing,
see that. Yeah.
And so I'm just at the moment I'm really interested in just like, what does collaboration really mean now?
The future collaboration.
Yeah.
It's like I'm kind of on the fence of it. I feel
because does it get to a point where it becomes nothing?
It's expected, right? Mm-hmm. And I think collaboration, my understanding was it was an opportunity for you to reach new audiences and to go beyond what your brand could necessarily deliver. It gives you that flexibility. So you can do stuff through a partner that you couldn't do. You have the license to do yourself. But sometimes I think a collaboration between two brands can water down the proposition, right? If there's not too much dissimilar or a kind of a differentiated proposition, I'm not sure how much impact it has. It's expected. And
I think in this kind of, it's funny, what brand, I'm not going to shout out the brand, but there's a brand that at the moment, in the space of like new luxury, where it's not really new anymore. And the idea of luxury has evolved to another meaning.
Yeah.
Not even a concern, my observation is, how do you still remain luxury if you're
talking about Gucci?
Yeah. Not
North
just
Face. Gucci North Face?
Gucci North Face, Gucci Palace. Not even just Gucci. A lot of the luxury houses are kind of trying to like play in the popular culture space.
Yeah.
And I don't have the answer. I don't know if it's wrong or if it's right. But I wonder how you can still sustain this kind of like
premium
untouchable-
position.
Yeah, exactly.
Whilst jumping on hype and essentially doing sportswear. Like,
exactly.
And I agree. I think the North Face, I work with North Face, right? But it's like the North Face Gucci collaboration. I'm not quite sure who would have got gassed about that.
Yeah.
You're into luxury. Just seeing the Gucci print on a kind of a Nupsy jacket, it's like it almost degrades the halo of
exactly.
of
And
Gucci.
I also think, I wonder, I don't know the price points for those products. I think I looked at the price point for the Adidas Gucci one, and I was a bit like,
It's hard to get hold of. The RRP is not too bad,
but it's not that accessible though. Because if you look at the H&M partnership, remember back in the day when H&M used to, those price points were a bit more accessible.
Yeah.
They were still elevated.
60 quid for a shirt, mad, like cheap.
Exactly.
And they had the proper Versace print.
Exactly. So when I look at these collaborations, I know they're not for a young person to be able to access it. So I kind of wonder who it's for.
It's just like, it's so dead. It's just a hype consumer, and that whole hype streetwear mentality of collaborate X times X times X is done anyway. It's either like new luxury is more around like aspiration and the aspiration economy, and merging two things that are such different points within that economy. It feels a bit outmoded and old now.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know where it's going to go next. You know what I mean? I don't know what happens to the brand equity if all they do is just that. I don't know what happens to it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? That's only an observation as somebody who's like, my brand is a premium brand, playing within the codes of new luxury. How do you, like, I think we talked about this ages ago, when the world now is kind of democratized and luxury doesn't have the same meaning anymore, how do you still create that perception when now luxury is about being attainable, you know? So like,
and I think, you know, breaking down barriers and democratizing fashion and new luxury is amazing, but I do think it's a bit overplayed, and I think it's a bit too common, it's a bit too expected, and I think there's more interesting partnerships outside of working directly with a fashion brand. It's like maybe you look outside of that and you work with, I don't know, a car brand or any other pieces of like a watch brand. You know, when I think Bugatti and Jacob & Co do amazing collaborations, you're taking the two sickest things, you know, like a £3 million car and £1 million watch, and then you're doing collaborations around that makes sense. Like they're the same equity, status equity, and then you're just creating a bit more cultural relevance. But you know, some of the ones that we mentioned, a bit iffy about. But let's talk about your consumer, right? And you've already covered this in terms of how it's different per market, but what would you say is like the universal ideology of the consumer that you're trying to engage and draw into and bring into your brand?
I think at the core of it is part of what we just talked about in terms of their aspirations.
Yep.
They are aspiring for kind of the luxuries world.
Yep. The status seeking.
Extremely.
Yep.
And I think at the core of it, they are interested and inspired by the quote unquote the hustle.
Yeah.
So they're inspired by those who achieving success outside of like the
on their own terms,
corporate space.
Yeah.
And they want the means or have the means to try it themselves.
Yeah.
Basically. So I think at the core of it, they've got that, and we call it internally that like the hustle gen.
Yeah.
But essentially that's it. That kind of
entrepreneurial spirit, the tenacity for more, wanting to own something yourself.
Exactly.
Right, not
but
being held
also
back.
Unapologetic with celebrating it as well. So that's
flexing on
exactly
on those milestones of achievement.
Exactly.
Because even looking like you achieved, right, is a big thing, right, for young people. Right, it's demonstrating I'm on my way up.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and it's less and it's less seen as like crass.
Yeah.
To showcase your kind of like success.
Yeah, yeah.
Different cultures have nuances, so like you might not find that as much in say Japan.
Yeah.
But for the most part, globally, everyone's kind of okay with
conspicuous consumption.
Yeah, exactly.
Signaling I'm making it, I've got cash. It's become pop culture.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly. Like now I literally just like observe the change. Now I never used to notice that kind of stuff before, but now I'm just like, people really be out here. Especially what I find interesting is like even in America, like the women actually are like very kind of like status seeking, very blingy, the jewelry, all that stuff, which stuff I never really noticed before. But now I'm seeing that it's not just like the men, women are taking a part in it, and it's younger.
I think it's always been super rich. Traditionally was the rich, and then it was more of a working class mentality to them. To project in a kind of a financial reality beyond your reality, right? And that's kind of what drove a lot of success with luxury brands, right? It's actually not people with loads and loads of money that are buying and making these brands famous. It's people that are prioritizing their spending on luxury goods and might not have a lot of resource available. And I think if you look at flannels, they take so much money, cash, physical cash.
Wow.
It's mad. It's like, I think it was like 80% of their revenue comes from physical cash. People that are just desperate to buy into brands that project a certain identity, that signal success is a massive driver. So that's the consumer. How are you adapting to new media behaviors, consumption habits to engage with culture with this audience?
I think I did a talk a little while ago on like NFTs.
Yeah.
I know you're a fan of.
Go on.
I'm not a fan. I'm more of a fan of like all these things. In some respects, there's like a while the platform change, the behavior on the platform is kind of like a consistent, right?
Yeah.
It's nothing is that inherently new.
Yeah.
So really, in terms of how we're looking at any spaces that we're going to go into, it's more from a place of what is our role in that space.
In each of those different ecosystems.
Exactly. And how can we create value in that space?
Yeah.
So at the moment, I think we've done some stuff. I know we've done some stuff in China with one of our ambassadors in the kind of like Web3 digital kind of world.
Yeah.
But again, there's a value system there. The exchange is quite clear.
Yeah.
I don't think it's out yet. So I don't know if I can talk about it. But the exchange is quite clear. And when it comes out, you'll see it. But from our perspective, and I know this has been very like, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not given the nuance it deserves. But for me, when I think of Web3, NFTs, all those spaces, it's all the same. Whether it's my space, it's not. I know it's not the same.
Yeah.
In terms of the mindset that I go into it with, the mindset is still the same. The mindset is what's our currency in that space? What can we? What value can we add that's going to be meaningful to the consumer in that space?
Yes, it's the same drivers, just different formats.
Exactly.
All right, so. One second to last question, I think is important to give you an opportunity to give one piece of advice to other brand marketeers that are looking to follow your steps in creating a cultural selling proposition for a brand. What piece of one advice would you give them?
Well, I want to do more than one.
Give them the top three. Go on then. This is gold. It's real talk. I think this whole interview, there's so much in it that you could learn and incorporate in terms of how you're making decisions internally. But go on, let's hear your top three.
I think the first thing is you have to work with people who are in that space. I think there's when I say work with, whether it's consultants, whether you hire, I think I'm not talking about the UK space in particular, just in any space that you're going to go into, you need to do it in an authentic way. So you have to work with people who understand the landscape that you're trying to engage in as a kind of like a beginning. I think gone are the days of brands thinking they can own anything. Yeah. And so
true.
You can't go in there thinking, well, we're just going to like, and don't worry, at Chivas we do all the time. We go in and we try to own everything.
We're going to own music.
We put our logos everywhere. But the point is, no, we're not trying to own music. We're never going to own music. We're not Stormzy. So I don't think as a brand you should go in there thinking that you can own a space. There has to be a value exchange. Yeah. And sometimes that value exchange isn't like now. You're not going to see the value like tomorrow. You might see the value in a year's time, in 2 years' time, in 3 years' time. And the value might not appear as you think it's going to appear. Yeah. So often the values that brands are after are like KPIs, metrics, impressions.
Super short term.
Those kind of values. And I get that because that's the value that shows your budget holders or your whatever, your board, that there's been a return. But often the return will, if it's culture return, it will probably take a lot longer.
Yeah, man.
Than or
6 months, 12 months.
Yeah.
It takes time to
Exactly.
transform. And for people to like, people are so busy, like talk around the attention economy. People don't really give a fuck about brands. It's like, how are you showing up in their world in an interesting way?
That's what I find it so funny. Like, you know what? And I my team does it, we do it, but I find it funny. You know, when you write like content plans and a client goes, the first episode, second episode, third episode, whatever, and then they create all this drama around like releasing it in that specific order. I'm like, no one cares.
Nobody cares. People just are so concerned with their own world.
This isn't Stranger Things. It's not Game of Thrones. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, nobody is going to die in a ditch if you release it one day later.
Yeah.
And that's me talking as somebody who, for a living, is producing.
Your bread and butter, yeah.
Do you get? So I understand that brands have to stop thinking that the world cares about their thing. Like, why should the world care about your thing? Like, what's the value for the consumer to care about it?
Yeah.
And I think the third thing is just gotta have a bit of confidence and try stuff. Like I said, test and learn. Hope it works, and if it doesn't work, it's okay, because some aspect of it will work. Yeah. And you're gonna learn from. And if it doesn't work, the bits that don't work, you'll learn from it. Yeah,
I think that's a bold and a kind of an aspiring like attitudes to have with content, right? Because it is right. You know, 1 in 3 might land, but as long as you're continuing to strengthen your you know, what you deliver, how you work with talent, it's like you will come up and eventually you will start to see the dial move.
I always look at like talent as often like for inspiration. So if I look at the likes of Stormzy's or whoever it is, I look at their models, and they don't always get it right. Do you know what I mean? They might release a song and it fails.
It fails, yeah, and that's even expected as part of the plan. It's
exactly,
like, we know we're gonna fail, but whatever, we're gonna go out and we're gonna see what works.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I just think sometimes with brands, we've just got to take more risk. Yeah. Calculated risks, of course, because it's money. It's not my money. It's somebody's money. Do you know what I mean? So there's an element of return that has to be seen, but having the notion that it's more important to take the risk, push boundaries, work with the right people, and sometimes the right people are a bit more scarier to work with. And what I mean by that, sometimes the right people you never worked with before. Yeah, innovators are always risk takers. Yeah, exactly. So it's a bit more by nature. It's easier to work with your traditional agency or your traditional partners because they're on the roster or proven track record. Do you know what I mean? Shiny case studies. They make it easy for you. Nice. Sometimes it is harder to say, for me, in my team, sometimes we in-house a lot. So the production company that I work with isn't your traditional like big production company. Yeah. Some of the creatives I work with aren't your traditional creatives. So there are challenges that come along with that approach. Yeah. And you're kind of in the trenches more so than maybe more hands-on, because you're very hands-on when you work. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And so like some traditional brand people don't want to be that hands-on, but I think in this space we're trying to be in, you kind of have to be. Well, that's my perspective. Yeah, no, I think that's part of your success. So last question, and how we always finish our interviews, we're going to do a crep check on my feet today. I have got Jordan 1 Crimson Tints, I think 2021. Oyin, what you got? New Balance. I don't even know what number it is. What number is it? 574. There we go. That's Oyin. Thank you so much. No worries. Thank you. I'm sure there's a lot of people got a ton of value out of that, and it's lovely to see you, mate. Out. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Hey. Yo, salute to everyone for listening to Back to School. If you like what you heard today, hit us up on nerdscollective.com. That's NERDSCOLLECTIVE.com. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And we out.